A single sentence. That's all it took. Not a bomb threat, not a catastrophic mechanical failure, but 4 simple condescending words spoken by a flight attendant to a passenger in first class. Those 4 words, born from a casual ugly prejudice, would set in motion a chain of events so precise and so devastating that within 72 hours they would ground an entire international airline, wipe $2 billion off its market value, and utterly destroy the career of the woman who spoke them. This isn't a story about a complaint filed with customer service. This is a story about what happens when you mistake a quiet, unassuming passenger for just another face in the crowd, when, in reality, you've just insulted the one person on Earth with the power to burn your entire world to the ground. The air in the first-class cabin of Ascend Air Flight 818 from JFK to San Francisco was a carefully curated symphony of calm. The scent was a bespoke blend of lavender and white tea. The lighting was a soft dawn-like glow, and the gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce Trent 900 engines was a promise of smooth passage across the continent. Dr. Amelia Hayes settled into seat 2A, the plush leather sighing under her weight. She was a small woman, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy blue blazer and charcoal slacks, her hair pulled back in neat, intricate braids. To the casual observer, she was just another successful professional. Anonymous. Unremarkable. This anonymity was a tool one she had honed over a decade and a half. In her world, the world of cybersecurity and ethical hacking being underestimated was the ultimate advantage. The CIOs and government officials who paid her consulting firm, Digital Ghost, millions of dollars a year, knew her as a legend, the woman who could digitally dismantle a Fortune 500 company in an afternoon to show them where the cracks were. But here on Flight 818, she was just a passenger looking forward to 5 hours of uninterrupted work before her keynote speech at the Cybersphere Summit in San Francisco. The boarding process continued, a parade of expensive suits and confident smiles. Amelia had her noise-cancelling headphones on, but not yet playing music, allowing her to remain aware of her surroundings. That's when she first saw her, the flight attendant. She was a senior purser, judging by the silver trim on her uniform. A woman in her late 40s, with a helmet of blonde hair, a practiced stiff smile, and eyes that swept across the cabin with an air of weary ownership. Her name tag read Karen. The first microaggression was subtle. While Karen offered pre-departure champagne to the white businessman across the aisle with a warm, "Mr. Jennings, so good to have you back with us," her approach to Amelia was different. She stopped by 2A, holding the tray out. "Champagne?" she asked the single word, clipped, devoid of warmth. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Amelia simply nodded. "Thank you. Just water for me, please." Karen's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. She returned a moment later, placing the glass of water on the coaster with a little too much force. A small thing, a nothing. But it was a signal, a shift in the atmosphere, that only people who have lived their lives on the receiving end of such signals can truly feel. As the last of the first-class passengers boarded a young man in a hoodie and expensive sneakers, probably a tech startup founder, fumbled with his oversized carry-on, trying to fit it into the overhead bin. He was blocking to the aisle. Karen materialized at his side, her voice a saccharine blade. "Sir, please, we need to clear the aisle for takeoff preparations." He grunted, struggling. "It's just stuck." Karen sighed, a theatrical display of impatience. She scanned the cabin, her eyes landing directly on Amelia, who was simply observing the scene over the rim of her water glass. Karen pointed a perfectly manicured finger at her. "You," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet cabin. "Staff, can you give him a hand with that?" The hum of the engines seemed to vanish. The world narrowed to the space between seat 2A and the purser standing in the aisle. Amelia slowly lowered her glass. The businessman, Mr. Jennings, looked up from his Wall Street journal. The young tech founder paused his struggle, confused. Every head in the small exclusive cabin turned. Staff. The word hung in the air, thick and poisoned. In that single word, Karen had stripped Amelia of her identity. She wasn't Dr. Amelia Hayes, a world-renowned expert in her field, a keynote speaker, a first-class passenger who had paid over $3,000 for her ticket. She was just staff, a flight attendant out of uniform, someone who was there to serve, not to be served. A black woman, and therefore in Karen's mind, part of the help. Amelia felt a cold, familiar fire ignite in her chest. She had felt it 1,000 times before, in boardrooms where she was mistaken for the coffee assistant at conferences, where men explained her own theories back to her. But this felt different, more public, more blatant. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her power was in her stillness, in the unnerving calm that settled over her in moments of conflict. She carefully placed her headphones on the seat beside her and met Karen's gaze. "I'm sorry," Amelia said, her voice soft but resonant, each word a carefully polished stone. "I think you've made a mistake." Karen's face flushed slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her features. "We're trying to prepare for departure. If you're off duty, you still need to assist when asked." She was doubling down, unable or unwilling to fathom her error. The young man in the hoodie finally spoke up. "Whoa, lady, she's a passenger. Her seat is right there." He gestured towards Amelia. It was only then that Karen's eyes flicked down to the seat number, to the half-empty glass of water, to the expensive laptop bag at Amelia's feet. The realization dawned, but with it came not apology, but defensive anger. Her professional mask cracked. "Oh," she said, her tone dripping with dismissive condescension. "Well, my mistake." She turned her back on Amelia without another word and snapped at the young man. "Just put the bag under the seat in front of you if it won't fit." She bustled away towards the galley. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a swift, contemptuous dismissal. Amelia sat back in her seat, her heart pounding, not with anger but with a sudden chilling clarity. She looked around the cabin. Mr. Jennings was already hidden behind his newspaper again, eager to retreat from the awkwardness. A few other passengers offered her fleeting, pitying glances before quickly looking away. Only the young man in the hoodie, who had now stowed his bag, caught her eye and gave a small apologetic shrug. He subtly angled his phone down the red recording light, blinking for a few seconds before he put it away. Amelia gave him a tight, appreciative nod. For the next 5 hours, as Flight 8118 soared at 35,000 feet, Amelia didn't work. She didn't watch a movie. She didn't sleep. She just sat there, the cold fire in her chest cooling into something much harder and more dangerous a plan. Karen Miller served the other passengers with forced cheerfulness, pointedly avoiding Amelia's section. A junior flight attendant, a nervous young woman named Chloe, was sent to handle all of Amelia's requests. When the plane landed at SFO, Amelia was one of the first to deplane. As she passed the cockpit, she saw Karen chatting with the pilot, laughing about something, as if nothing had happened, as if her humanity wasn't a disposable commodity. In the terminal, Amelia paused. She could file a complaint. She could send an email. She could even post on social media. She knew exactly what would happen. She'd get a form letter apology, maybe a $200 flight voucher, and Karen would get a slap on the wrist, a mandatory diversity and inclusion webinar she'd click through while filing her nails. No, that was their system, their way of managing dissent, of placating the offended until they went away. She wasn't going to play their game. She was going to burn the whole game to the ground. The presidential suite at the St. Regis San Francisco was less a hotel room and more a glass-walled fortress overlooking the city. Amelia hadn't booked it to be extravagant. She'd booked it for the space, the privacy, and most importantly, the commercial-grade hard-wired fiber-optic internet connection that bypassed the hotel's standard guest network. After a 15-minute call to the concierge to decline housekeeping for the next 48 hours and to request a steady supply of black coffee and bottled water, she went to work. This was her element. The cool, logical world of code and data, a world where prejudice and ignorance held no power. It was a world of pure logic of cause and effect, and she was about to become the cause. She unpacked her gear, laying it out on the vast mahogany dining table. It wasn't the stereotypical hacker's setup of a single laptop in a dark room. This was the arsenal of a master. A sleek, matte black custom laptop running a hardened version of Linux was her command console. 2 additional ultra-thin portable monitors were connected, flanking it. A small black box, a network intrusion device of her own design, was plugged directly into the wall's Ethernet port. Her fingers, adorned with simple, unpolished nails, flew across the keyboard, a flurry of motion that was both elegant and terrifyingly efficient. First reconnaissance. She wasn't Amelia Hayes' passenger anymore. She was Nyx, her handle in the deep web circles where she had first made her name as a teenager. Nyx, the Greek goddess of the night, an entity of shadow and power. She started with the official channels, not to use them, but to map them. She navigated to Ascend Air's corporate website, her eyes scanning not the content, but the code behind it. She examined the site's architecture, the APIs they used, the third-party vendors they integrated with for booking, customer relations, and data management. It was like looking at the blueprints of a building, searching for a loose brick or an unlocked window. She found one within minutes, a forgotten, unpatched vulnerability in their customer feedback portal's file upload system. It was a rookie mistake, the kind of thing an intern would make. For a multi-billion-dollar airline, it was unforgivable. It was the digital equivalent of leaving the front door wide open. With a few keystrokes, she exploited the vulnerability not to steal customer data or cause immediate damage, but to plant a seed. She uploaded a tiny, innocuous-looking file, disguised as a corrupted image. This file was her Trojan horse. It contained a sophisticated rootkit of her own design, a digital ghost that would silently replicate itself, burrowing deep into Ascend Air's internal network, giving her persistent, high-level access. It was completely undetectable by their commercial-grade security software. She was inside. Next, she turned her attention to the employee who had started it all. Karen Miller. Through the foothold she'd established, she accessed the airline's internal employee database. It was surprisingly easy. Their internal security was a joke. Search Miller K. Role Purser. A file appeared on her screen. Karen Miller, employee ID 74B39, based out of JFK, 17 years of service. A photo, the same helmet of blonde hair, the same stiff smile. Her file was littered with commendations for efficiency, but also flagged with 6 minor passenger complaints over the years, all with a similar theme: rude, dismissive, unprofessional. All of them had been closed with no action taken. Karen was protected likely by her seniority or union status. The system was designed to insulate people like her from consequences. Amelia wasn't interested in her personal life, her emails, or her finances. That was petty. Her goal was systemic, not personal. But she did download a copy of Karen's upcoming work schedule. Information was ammunition, and she was building an arsenal. At that moment, her phone buzzed. It was a text from the young man from the flight. He had found her name on the Cybersphere Summit's speaker list. "Hey, Dr. Hayes, Leo Ritter from the flight." What that flight attendant did was disgusting. I got it on video. I'm posting it. People need to see this. Amelia considered it for a moment. A social media storm would create noise, a distraction. It would provide the perfect cover for the surgical chaos she was about to unleash. "Do what you feel is right, Leo. Just be prepared for the attention," she texted back. "Don't worry about me." They picked the wrong person to mess with. And they really picked the wrong person to mess with when they messed with you, didn't they? Good luck on your keynote. Amelia allowed herself a small, grim smile. Leo had no idea. She turned her attention back to her monitors. The digital ghost was now fully integrated into Ascend Air's network. It sent her a quiet ping access to all systems confirmed. She could see everything: flight operations crew, scheduling, baggage logistics, internal communications, financial systems. She had the digital keys to the entire kingdom. She opened the flight operations module. A real-time map of the world glowed on her screen, dotted with hundreds of little airplane icons, each one an Ascend Air flight, currently in the air. Each one a fragile ecosystem of lives and machinery, all held together by a complex web of data and code. A web she now controlled. She could ground them all with a few commands. She could reroute them, scramble their communications. But that was too crude, too dangerous. She would never endanger a single life. Her methods were far more insidious. She wouldn't be a sledgehammer. She would be a cancer, a creeping rot that would collapse the system from the inside out, making it look like the company was simply, inexplicably falling apart. Her campaign would have 3 phases. Phase 1, nuisance. She would target the non-essential customer-facing systems, create annoyance and confusion, a warning shot across the bow. Phase 2, chaos. She would escalate to core operational logistics, hit them in their wallet, creating a logistical nightmare that would cost them millions. Phase 3, paralysis. The final move. She would target the one system that was the absolute heart of the airline. She would stop the heart and watch the body fall. She cracked her knuckles, the sound echoing in the silent, cavernous suite. The coffee was getting cold. The sun was setting over the San Francisco Bay, casting long shadows across the city. Night was falling, and Nix was ready to get to work. The first sign that something was deeply wrong at Ascend Air came not with a bang, but with a bizarre, out-of-tune jingle. On Flight 902, a red-eye from Los Angeles to Miami, passengers settling in for the night found their seat-back entertainment screens flickering to life on their own. Instead of the usual library of Hollywood blockbusters, every single screen in the plane began playing a continuous 1-hour loop of a 1980s instructional video on the proper way to care for house ferns. The audio, a tinny, upbeat synthesizer track, could not be turned off or muted. On a transatlantic flight from Chicago to London, the system was more creative. It began randomly rebooting every 15 minutes each time, with a different language as the default. Passengers would just get settled into a film in English, only to have the system restart in Korean, then Portuguese, then Russian. The flight crew's attempts to reset the master system were futile. The IT help desk at Ascend Air's headquarters in Dallas was flooded with calls from frantic flight crews. The on-duty manager, a harried man named David Chen, initially dismissed it as a server glitch related to a recent software update. Just have them do a hard reset of the cabin master control, he instructed his team, annoyance creeping into his voice. It's a non-essential system. Tell them to hand out free drinks and get on with it. But the problem wasn't isolated. It was everywhere. Every single plane in Ascend Air's fleet of over 300 aircraft was experiencing a similar yet uniquely frustrating issue with its in-flight entertainment IFE system. One plane's moving map showed its location as the middle of Antarctica. Another's movie selection was replaced entirely by hundreds of hours of unedited C-SPAN footage from 1994. In her suite, Amelia, or rather, Nix, monitored the chaos with detached precision. This was Phase 1. The IFE system was the perfect first target, high visibility, deeply annoying to customers, but with zero impact on flight safety. She had gained access through a back door in the third-party software, provided by a German company called Avionics. Like most corporate giants, Ascend Air had trusted its vendors, implicitly never bothering to audit their code. Amelia's rootkit had identified this vulnerability and pushed a silent, malicious update to the entire fleet simultaneously via the plane's satellite data links. The code she wrote wasn't just destructive, it was intelligent. It bypassed the crew's attempts at a reset, reinfecting the system nanoseconds after a reboot. It was designed to make the IT department feel helpless, to give them a puzzle they couldn't possibly solve. By morning, Ascend Air and Pwok Ferngate were trending on Twitter. Passengers were posting videos of the bizarre glitches, complaining about the sleepless flights. Leo Ritter's original video of the confrontation with Karen Miller was now gaining serious traction in the slipstream of the airline's sudden, inexplicable implosion of customer service. The video, clear and damning, showed Karen's sneering dismissal of Amelia. His caption was simple: "This is how Ascend Air treats its first-class passengers. Maybe this is why their whole system is falling apart." Ascend Air fail. The two narratives were beginning to merge in the public's mind, an airline that was both prejudiced and incompetent. In the Dallas headquarters, the mood shifted from annoyance to alarm. Mark Theron, Ascend Air's notoriously aggressive CEO, stormed into the IT department. Theron was a man who saw the world in terms of stock prices and press releases. "What the hell is going on with the IFE?" He boomed, his face red. "The morning shows are laughing at us. We look like a joke." David Chen, the IT manager, tried to explain. "We don't know, sir. It's like a ghost in the machine. It's across the entire fleet, but there's no trace of an external breach. Our firewalls are clean. It has to be a bug in the avionics update." "Then get avionics on the phone," Theron roared. "Get their German engineers out of bed and tell them to fix their damn software, or I'll sue them back to the Stone Age." Amelia watched all of this unfold. She had, of course, breached their internal network security cameras and was now viewing a live feed of the IT department's panic on one of her screens. She had even anticipated their next move. As the Ascend Air team desperately tried to contact avionics, she intercepted their communications, subtly altering the data packets to make it seem like a routine server outage on avionics' end. The German company, for their part, saw a perfectly functioning system and assured Ascend Air the problem wasn't on their end. The two companies were now pointing fingers at each other, trapped in a loop of confusion orchestrated by a single woman in a hotel room 1,500 miles away. This was the art of the attack, not just breaking things, but manipulating information, turning an organization's own processes and protocols against itself. While the IT department chased ghosts, Amelia prepared for Phase 2. The IFE system was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served. She shifted her focus from the planes in the air to the operations on the ground, specifically the baggage handling system. It was another sprawling, complex network managed by a different set of software, this time from a company called Aerologistics, and it was just as vulnerable. Her digital ghost had already mapped the entire system. She saw how a bag checked in at JFK was assigned a unique barcode. That barcode was scanned, and its data passenger name, flight number, final destination, and connecting flights was fed into a central server. The server then routed the bag through a dizzying maze of conveyor belts, sorters and carts, ensuring it ended up on the right plane. It was a modern marvel of logistics. Amelia's plan was simple and elegant. She wouldn't crash the system. She would just introduce a tiny, statistically insignificant error into the sorting algorithm. She wrote a small script that would, for approximately 30% of all bags processed, swap the destination airport code with the code of another random airport in the Ascend Air network. The bag tags would still be correct to the human eye, but the underlying data guiding the automated sorters would be wrong. A bag belonging to a man flying from Dallas to Chicago would find itself on a flight to Honolulu. A woman's suitcase on its way to Seattle would end up in Orlando. It would be untraceable, appearing as a series of random, unconnected human errors. She activated the script at 6:00 a.m. Central Time, the beginning of the morning rush, at Ascend Air's main hubs in Dallas, Chicago, and JFK. The effect was not immediate. It was a slow-motion catastrophe. For the first hour, it was just a few dozen misplaced bags' background noise in a busy airport. But as thousands of passengers began their journeys, the numbers grew exponentially. By 10:00 a.m., the baggage claim carousels for Ascend Air flights across the country were scenes of chaos. Instead of luggage, there were just trickles of orphaned bags from other cities. The lost and damaged luggage counters were besieged by furious passengers. A family on their way to a Disney vacation in Orlando received their bags in Anchorage, Alaska. A businessman landing in London for a critical meeting found his suitcase containing his presentation, and Suits was on its way to Tokyo. The system wasn't down. It was actively and efficiently creating mayhem. It was a logistical nightmare of unprecedented scale. In her San Francisco suite, Amelia watched the news reports begin to trickle in. Her keynote was in 6 hours. She took a sip of fresh hot coffee, the steam warming her face. Phase 1 had been a prank. Phase 2 was a body blow. The financial cost of this baggage disaster alone would be in the tens of millions, reuniting bags with owners paying out compensation, the damage to their brand. And she was just getting started. On her screen, she pulled up the employee schedule for Karen Miller. She was due to work Flight 112 from JFK to LAX this evening. A slow, cold smile touched Amelia's lips. It was time to make things just a little more personal. The video Leo Ritter had posted was no longer just a viral clip. It was a cultural touchstone. It had a name: the Staff Incident. Major news networks had picked it up. CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox News played the 45-second clip, followed by panels of commentators dissecting the breathtaking arrogance of the flight attendant and the quiet, dignified response of the passenger. By noon, Dr. Amelia Hayes was no longer an anonymous victim. Her name, her profession, and the fact that she was the keynote speaker at a major tech conference were all over the internet. The narrative was irresistible. A powerful, brilliant black woman, a literal expert in digital systems, had been subjected to casual racism by an airline that was now coincidentally suffering a complete and total technological meltdown. The internet, in its infinite wisdom, connected the dots with glee. Memes flooded social media. Amelia as a digital avenger. Karen Miller's face photoshopped onto a picture of a dumpster fire with the Ascend Air logo on it. Ascend Air's corporate communications department was in a full-blown panic. Their initial strategy was to ignore the video and focus on the technical issues. But the two stories were now inextricably linked. Their hand was forced. At 1:00 p.m., they released a statement from CEO Mark Theron. It was a masterclass in corporate non-apology. Ascend Air is aware of a video circulating on social media depicting an interaction between a crew member and a valued passenger. We are also experiencing unprecedented, system-wide disruptions to our baggage and entertainment services. We want to assure our customers that these are two separate and unrelated issues. We are conducting a full investigation into the interaction on Flight 818. Ascend Air is committed to diversity and inclusion, and we sincerely regret any instance where we do not live up to our high standards. Our teams are working 24/7 to resolve the technical disruptions and restore normal operations. The statement was torn to shreds online within minutes. "Valued passenger, you called her staff," one tweet read. Another said, "Unrelated issues, or did you fire your entire IT department and replace them with Karen?" In his Dallas office, Mark Theron threw his phone against the wall. His company was a laughingstock, his stock price was beginning to slide, and every airport he operated out of was a pit of chaos. The baggage crisis was spiraling. They had thousands of bags in the wrong cities, and with the system still actively misrouting new ones, they had no way to stop the bleeding. They had to resort to sorting every single bag by hand, a process so slow and archaic, it was causing massive delays across their entire network. Flights were being held on the tarmac for hours waiting for luggage to be manually loaded. "Get me the file on that flight attendant," Theron snarled at his assistant. "The one from the video. Karen Miller. I want to know everything." He needed a sacrifice. The public was baying for blood, and he was going to give it to them. Meanwhile, in her hotel room, Amelia was enjoying the show. The public outcry was a beautiful, unforeseen force multiplier. It was the emotional soundtrack to her cold, logical attack. She hadn't needed to hack public opinion. Society had done that work for her. Her focus remained on the systems. Phase 2 was working perfectly. The airline was hemorrhaging money and goodwill. The IT department, still convinced they were dealing with a vendor bug and not a malicious actor, was spinning its wheels, rebooting servers and running useless diagnostics. They were like medieval doctors trying to cure a virus with leeches. They couldn't even conceive of the disease, let alone the cure. Now for the personal touch, she looked at Karen Miller's schedule again. Flight 112. JFK to LAX, departing at 8:00 p.m. Eastern, a flagship route often filled with celebrities and industry power players, a very public stage. Amelia accessed the catering and supply logistics for JFK. With a few subtle manipulations of the ordering data, she made a small change to the provisioning for Flight 112. A very small change. She didn't touch the safety equipment or the fuel load. Her adjustments were purely inconvenient. She zeroed out the order for all coffee, all soft drinks, except for tomato juice, and all first-class meal options, except for the vegan tofu scramble. She also tripled the order for air sickness bags. Next, she moved to the JFK ground crew's internal communication system. She found the dispatch notes for the crew transport van, scheduled to pick up Karen's team from their hotel. She subtly altered the pickup address, changing it from the Marriott near the airport to a different Marriott on the far side of Queens. The pickup time remained the same. The final piece was the gate assignment. Flight 112 was scheduled to depart from Gate B32. Amelia accessed the Port Authority's gate management system, a shockingly insecure piece of legacy software, and reassigned the flight to Gate B38 at the absolute farthest end of the terminal. She then made sure the internal update to Ascend Air's own systems was delayed, so the gate change wouldn't appear on the crew's schedules or the main departure boards until the last possible minute. She leaned back, satisfied. She had constructed a perfect localized storm of misery that would envelop Karen Miller's workday. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that would get her fired on its own. Just a series of escalating, soul-crushing frustrations designed to give her a taste of the helplessness she had so casually inflicted on others. The keynote speech was at 4:00 p.m. Amelia shut down her command center, packed her essential laptop into her bag, and changed back into her impeccable navy blazer. She walked out of the St. Regis, a picture of calm professionalism, and took a car to the Moscone Center. The main hall was packed with thousands of the brightest minds in tech. When she was introduced, the applause was thunderous. The host mentioned her work, her company, and then added, "And some of you may know her from a video that has been making the rounds today. Dr. Hayes, we're all honored to have you." Amelia walked to the center of the stage, a small smile on her face. The topic of her speech was Asymmetrical Warfare in the Digital Age, How Small Vulnerabilities Can Topple Giants. She began, her voice clear and confident, echoing through the auditorium. An organization is not a fortress. It's an ecosystem. It's a complex web of dependencies, of trust, of human processes and digital systems. And the most dangerous threat is not the one that batters at the front gate. It's the one that gets inside and convinces the system to tear itself apart. As she spoke, detailing with chilling hypothetical precision how one could destabilize a major corporation by manipulating logistics, creating informational chaos, and exploiting trust in third-party vendors, a few people in the audience who worked in aviation, cybersecurity began to exchange nervous glances. Miles away at JFK, Karen Miller's day was just beginning to unravel. Her cruise transport van was 45 minutes late, having gone to the wrong hotel. When they finally arrived at the airport, flustered and, behind schedule, they saw on the board that their gate had been changed to the farthest possible point in the terminal. They had to run, dragging their rollerboards behind them. When Karen finally got on the plane, sweating and irritable, she was informed by the catering manager of the bizarre supply shortage. No coffee, no Coke, only tomato juice and tofu scramble for the A-listers in first class. She would have to face their wrath for the next 6 hours. The final straw came when she logged into her pre-flight briefing terminal. The lead story on the company's internal news portal was a memo from the CEO's office. It announced the immediate unpaid suspension of purser Karen Miller, pending an investigation into the deeply troubling and unprofessional conduct displayed on Flight 818. Her face from the viral video was right there next to the headline. The cabin crew around her fell silent, staring at her. Her career at Ascend Air was over. She had been publicly sacrificed by the very company she had served for 17 years. As Karen stood there, humiliated and stunned, her phone began to buzz incessantly with notifications from news alerts and social media tags. The world now knew her name. She had become, in the space of a single day, one of the most hated people in America. She sank into a passenger seat, the full weight of the consequences she had unleashed finally crashing down upon her. And in San Francisco, Dr. Amelia Hayes was just getting to the climax of her speech, a slide titled Phase 3 Systemic Paralysis, projected onto the giant screen behind her. The audience was hanging on her every word. The real checkmate was yet to come. The applause for Amelia's keynote speech was deafening. She had delivered a masterclass, a chillingly prescient lecture that felt less like a theoretical exercise and more like a live report from an ongoing war. She took a few questions, answered them with cool academic detachment, and then slipped away from the post-speech reception, leaving a buzzing room of awestruck tech professionals in her wake. Back in the St. Regis suite, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, she re-established her command center. The time for games was over. The baggage chaos and IFE glitches had been the feints, the distracting jabs to the body. Now it was time for the knockout blow to the head. It was time for Phase 3. Her target was the holy of holies for any airline, the crew scheduling, and flight operations software. At Ascend Air, this system was called SkyGrid. It wasn't just a database. It was the airline's central nervous system. SkyGrid dictated which pilots flew, which planes, which flight attendants worked, which routes, and ensured that every flight was staffed in perfect compliance with complex FAA regulations and union rules. It managed rest periods, certifications, and aircraft assignments. If SkyGrid stopped working, Ascend Air stopped flying. Crashing it would be too obvious. It would signal a direct cyber attack, and while they might not find her, they would know what they were dealing with. Her plan was infinitely more elegant, more diabolical. She wasn't going to destroy SkyGrid. She was going to poison it. For the past 24 hours, her digital ghost had been quietly siphoning data from the SkyGrid servers, creating a perfect mirror copy on an encrypted drive. She now had the complete operational DNA of the airline, every pilot's certification, every flight attendant's schedule, every aircraft's maintenance log. Her script was a work of art. It was designed to introduce microscopic data corruptions, subtle but critical errors, that would render the system's output completely unusable, while making the system itself appear to be functioning perfectly. At 11:00 p.m. Pacific Time, she executed the code. The effect began to ripple through Ascend Air's global operations almost instantly. In the operations center in Dallas, a night shift crew scheduler named Frank was preparing the flight plans for the next morning's departures. He stared at his screen in disbelief. SkyGrid was telling him that Captain Michael Renner, a 20-year veteran certified only on the Boeing 777, was scheduled to pilot an Airbus A321 from Dallas to Cancun. The system also assigned him a first officer who, according to his records, had retired 3 years ago. Frank rebooted the program. The same impossible schedule appeared. He tried to manually override it, but the system wouldn't let him, citing a non-existent FAA compliance flag. In Chicago, a flight attendant crew for a 6:00 a.m. flight to Boston received their automated assignment. It directed them to report to a gate in Terminal 5. But their flight was departing from Terminal 2. Worse, their designated aircraft, according to SkyGrid, was currently undergoing heavy maintenance in a hangar in San Francisco. The chaos was quiet at first, a series of confusing emails and error messages. But as the sun rose on the East Coast, the full scope of the disaster became apparent. The data wasn't just wrong. It was nonsensically, maliciously wrong. Pilots based in New York were assigned to flights departing from Los Angeles. Flight attendant crews were scheduled for back-to-back transatlantic flights, with no mandated rest period, a cardinal sin in aviation. Aircraft were assigned to airports whose runways were too short for them to land on. The entire intricate logistical ballet of running an airline collapsed into a clumsy, stumbling mess. The first flight of the day, Ascend Air 550 from JFK, was delayed because the system insisted its co-pilot was a man who had been fired for misconduct 6 months prior. The gate agents couldn't board passengers because SkyGrid hadn't assigned a flight number to the aircraft sitting at the gate. By 7:00 a.m. Eastern, Ascend Air had to cancel 20 flights. By 8:00 a.m. the number was over 100. By 9:30 a.m. Mark Theron, his face ashen, stood in the Dallas Operations Center, which now resembled a war room on the losing side. His managers were screaming into phones, trying to manually reschedule thousands of crew members using spreadsheets and whiteboards, a task that was logistically impossible. They had no choice. At 9:45 a.m. Eastern, Ascend Air issued a statement announcing a full nationwide ground stop for all its flights. Shortly after, under pressure from the FAA, who were receiving bizarre and dangerous flight plan submissions from the airline, the ground stop was extended to their entire global fleet. An international airline had been shut down, not by weather, not by a strike, not by a terrorist act. It had been shut down by bad data. Amelia watched the breaking news on CNN from her suite. The chyron read, "Ascend Air in freefall entire fleet, grounded amid catastrophic IT failure." The stock market opened, and Ascend Air's stock, POWERFULSTORY, plummeted by 30% within the first 5 minutes of trading, wiping out nearly $2 billion of the company's value. The phone in her suite rang. It was the front desk. "Dr. Hayes, I'm so sorry to bother you, but there are 2 gentlemen here from the FBI. They'd like to have a word with you." Amelia felt a flicker of adrenaline, but not fear. She had planned for this. "Of course," she said calmly. "Send them up." She disconnected her command center, wiped the temporary memory on her machines, and slipped her core encrypted hard drive, the one containing the digital ghost, and all the evidence, into a hidden compartment in her suitcase lining. She walked over to the minibar, poured herself a glass of orange juice, and sat on the couch waiting. She knew they would come. In the world of cyber warfare, when something this big happened, you always talked to the keynote speaker from the big conference in town, especially if that speaker had just given a lecture on exactly how to do what had just been done. The knock on the door came. She took a slow sip of her juice, centered herself, and stood up to welcome them. The game had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. The 2 FBI agents, a man named Agent Harris and a woman named Agent Thorne, were polite but firm. They didn't have a warrant. This was a friendly inquiry. As one of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts who happened to be in the city where the attack seemed to be centered, Amelia was a logical person to consult. "Dr. Hayes," Agent Harris began, his eyes scanning the suite. "We're investigating the ongoing incident at Ascend Air. We believe it's a sophisticated, malicious cyber attack. Your keynote yesterday was remarkably prescient." Amelia met his gaze without flinching. "It's my job to be prescient, Agent Harris. I analyze theoretical vulnerabilities. It seems someone decided to make them practical. Someone with an incredible level of skill," Agent Thorne added, her tone sharp. "Someone who knows airline systems inside and out. Someone who could move through their network without tripping a single alarm. There aren't many people in the world with that kind of talent." Amelia nodded slowly. "You're right. There aren't." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "Have you considered that it might be an inside job, a disgruntled IT employee, or perhaps a state-sponsored actor testing their capabilities?" She offered them plausible alternative theories, laying a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead them away from her. They questioned her for an hour. She answered every query with technical specifics, outlining how she would investigate the breach. She recommended they look at the source code of the third-party software, especially avionics and aerologistics. She was, in effect, directing their investigation, helping them discover the very vulnerabilities she had exploited. She was the arsonist, acting as the lead fire marshal, and she played the part perfectly. They left with a list of technical suggestions and a promise to be in touch. They had no evidence, no reason to suspect her beyond coincidence and reputation. While Amelia was deftly handling the FBI, the fallout for others was accelerating. For Karen Miller, the ground stop was the final, brutal end. With the airline in a state of paralysis and financial freefall, CEO Mark Theron needed to project an image of decisive action. His first move was to make a public example of the woman who had become the face of the company's woes. At a televised press conference, Theron announced, "Effective immediately, the employee responsible for the initial unacceptable incident on Flight 818 has been terminated. Her actions do not represent the values of Ascend Air. We are an airline in crisis, and we are taking every step to clean house and restore the trust of our passengers." Karen Miller learned of her firing not from a manager or an HR representative, but from watching CNN in her lonely Queens apartment. The word "terminated" echoed in the small room. 17 years of service, her pension, her flight, benefits, her identity, all vaporized in a single humiliating public statement. Her phone, which had been buzzing with hateful messages, now also filled with gloating ones celebrating her downfall. Friends from work stopped returning her calls, distancing themselves from the toxic fallout. She was a pariah. She tried to rationalize, to blame the passenger, to blame the kid with the camera phone, to blame her boss for not backing her up. But in the quiet, crushing solitude of her apartment, a sliver of truth wedged its way in. It had all started with her, with her tired, angry prejudice, with 4 words: staff. Can you help spoken with the casual cruelty of someone who believes they are untouchable? She had poked a hornet's nest, never imagining that the hornet could be a dragon. The karma was not just for Karen. It was cascading through the entire corporate structure of Ascend Air. The board of directors, watching billions in shareholder value evaporate, was furious with Mark Theron. His dismissive handling of the initial incident, his disastrous non-apology, and his complete failure to protect the company's core infrastructure had exposed him as an incompetent leader. While the FBI, with Amelia's help, began looking into the vendor software, the airline's own internal investigation uncovered the years of ignored warnings from their own IT department. Memos from David Chen, the IT manager pleading for bigger budgets to patch legacy systems and upgrade security protocols, had been repeatedly denied by Theron, who preferred to spend the money on stock buybacks and marketing campaigns. David Chen, who had been on the verge of being fired as a scapegoat, became the star witness in the boardroom coup. He presented a damning timeline of willful negligence with Mark Theron at its center. 2 days after the ground stop began, with the airline still unable to operate and burning through hundreds of millions of dollars a day, the board convened an emergency meeting. Mark Theron was unceremoniously fired. His golden parachute was rescinded due to a gross negligence clause in his contract. The man who had sacrificed Karen Miller to save his own skin found himself suffering the exact same fate. The news of Theron's firing broke as Amelia was packing her bags to leave San Francisco. She paused, watching his disgraced face on the television screen. She felt no joy, no triumph, just a quiet, grim satisfaction. The system had, as she predicted, torn itself apart. The poison she had injected had worked, targeting the rotten parts and forcing the body to excise them. Her work was almost done. There was just one loose end to tie up. She needed to give the world a narrative, an explanation for the chaos that would cement her victory and ensure the lesson was not forgotten. She sat at her laptop one last time. Opening an encrypted anonymous email service routed through a dozen proxies, she began to type a message. The recipient was Jenna Masterson, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal, known for her deep sources in the tech world. The subject line was simple: the ghost in Ascend Air's machine. Ms. Masterson, the email began. You have been covering the collapse of Ascend Air. You believe it to be the work of a sophisticated hacker. You are correct. But you do not know the reason why. It was not for money. It was not for politics. It was an audit. It was a lesson. A lesson in what happens when a company's culture is as broken as its code. It began with a simple act of racism, a dismissal of a black woman's humanity. The company's response was to ignore it. What I did was to hold a mirror up to Ascend Air. Every vulnerability I exploited in their software, in their logistics, in their corporate culture, was a direct reflection of their own negligence and arrogance. They didn't just have a security problem, they had a soul problem. Attached, you will find a detailed technical breakdown of the vulnerabilities I used, along with internal memos showing that management was warned about them for years. Ascend Air was not the victim of a cyber attack. It was a victim of itself. She attached the encrypted files, hit send, and closed the laptop. The story was no longer hers. It belonged to the world now. Jenna Masterson's article landed like a bombshell, published on the front page of the Wall Street Journal under the headline, "Anatomy of a Shutdown Hacker, Nix Claims Ascend Air Attack Was a Karma Audit." It sent shockwaves through the aviation and tech industries. The technical data Amelia provided was irrefutable. It laid bare the airline's shoddy security and the management's criminal negligence. The internal memos proved that Theron and his executive team knew about the risks and did nothing. The narrative was electric. It wasn't just a hack, it was a reckoning. The mysterious Nix was framed as a vigilante, a digital Zorro punishing corporate malfeasance and prejudice. The story of the initial incident on Flight 818 was no longer a footnote. It was the prologue to the entire saga, the moral justification for the chaos that followed. For Ascend Air, the article was the final nail in the coffin. The stock, which had slightly recovered, nosedived again. The acting CEO was forced to issue a groveling, hour-long public apology. The company had to bring in an army of external cybersecurity consultants at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild their entire digital infrastructure from the ground up. It would be weeks before they could resume a full flight schedule, and years before they could rebuild passenger trust. The brand was permanently scarred. The FBI's investigation, armed with the details from the article, quickly confirmed the technical data. They quietly closed their inquiry into Dr. Amelia Hayes, now understanding she was more likely the catalyst than the perpetrator in the way they could ever prove in a court of law. Without a digital signature or a traceable path, Nix remained a ghost. And what of the players in this drama? Karen Miller became a cautionary tale. Unable to find work in the airline industry, her name now synonymous with a specific brand of public bigotry, she sold her apartment and moved to a small town in the Midwest to live with her sister, disappearing into obscurity. Her life was not ended, but it was irrevocably diminished, a quiet, lonely testament to the destructive power of a single thoughtless moment. Mark Theron, the deposed CEO, faced a barrage of shareholder lawsuits. His reputation in the corporate world was shattered his career over. He had climbed to the top on a ladder of arrogance and cost-cutting, and it had collapsed beneath him. Leo Ritter, the young man with the camera phone, found himself hailed as a citizen journalist. He was offered a job at a digital media startup, his life changed for the better by his simple act of bearing witness. And Dr. Amelia Hayes, she returned to her life. She continued to run her firm digital ghost advising corporations on the very kinds of vulnerabilities she had so expertly exploited. Her speaking fees doubled. Her reputation, already legendary in her field, now carried an almost mythical weight. No one ever publicly connected her to Nix, but in the hushed corridors of cybersecurity conferences and the encrypted back channels of the dark web, everyone knew. They knew who had the skill, the motive, and the quiet, steely resolve to pull it off. Months later, Amelia found herself once again in a first-class airport lounge, this time run by a rival airline. She was on her way to a conference in Geneva. As she sipped her water, she noticed a young black woman in the airline's uniform, a junior gate agent being spoken down to by an irate, red-faced passenger. The lounge manager, a crisp professional man, immediately walked over. He didn't address the angry passenger first. He turned to his employee. "Are you all right, Chloe?" he asked, his voice calm and supportive. He listened to her explanation, then turned to the passenger. "Sir, I understand you're frustrated, but there is no reason to speak to my staff that way. Let's find a solution, but we will do it respectfully." He handled the situation with quiet authority and empathy. He defended his employee. He treated her with dignity. Amelia watched, and for the first time since that day on Flight 818, the cold knot of anger in her chest finally completely dissolved. Her actions hadn't solved the world's problems. Prejudice and arrogance still existed. But she had thrown a very large, very heavy stone into the pond, and the ripples were changing things in small, meaningful ways. Companies were overhauling their security. They were also overhauling their customer service training and their corporate culture. The story of Attendant had become a brutal billion-dollar lesson in the importance of respect. A flight attendant approached her seat. He was a young man with a kind smile. "Dr. Hayes," he asked, "can I get you anything before you board?" "Another water, perhaps?" Amelia looked up at him and returned the smile genuine and warm. "No, thank you," she said. "I'm fine. Everything is just fine." She had not sought vengeance. She had sought accountability. And in the ashes of a fallen airline, a new, better standard was beginning to rise. Her war was over. She had won. So what's the takeaway from the incredible story of Dr. Amelia Hayes and the fall of Attendant? It's a stark reminder that in our hyper-connected world, the old power structures are more fragile than they appear. It shows how a single act of casual dehumanization can have consequences that ripple out on a global scale. Dr. Hayes, or Nix, became a force of nature, a living embodiment of karma, armed with a keyboard and a deep sense of justice. She didn't just file a complaint, she became the system's auditor, judge, and jury. Was she a hero fighting injustice with the tools at her disposal, or a dangerous vigilante who took the law into her own hands? The lines are blurry, but the outcome is crystal clear. One woman's refusal to be dismissed brought a corporate giant to its knees. What do you think was her response justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story of poetic justice and digital reckoning as compelling as we did, do us a favor and hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true stories where the powerful are held accountable and karma arrives right on schedule. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.